What's up, guys? Justin Garcia, a.k.a. Master Chim here. And on Skype video, I have a very good friend of mine, a guy that I've known 15 years at this point, Chris Savarese of Savarese BJJ. Sav, do me a favor, say what's up to the listeners of the Pressure Project.
What's up, guys?
All right. So, Sav, as he's more informally known amongst his friends and students, is a very, very good friend of mine. I've known, as I mentioned, a long while. And I don't know if, I think we've spoken about this before, but the first time I ever met Sav, he was running Tribe Fightwear, right? And it was at a tournament, and I was about halfway through running through, I think it was an advanced division at GQ. And my instructor, Rob Kahn, who was already friends with you at that point, was like, "Listen, you gotta sponsor my guy." And you were like, "Okay," and you like threw me a pair of shorts and a shirt. You were like, "Here, you're sponsored by Tribe." So I went and I put it on, and like the second half of the matches in the tournament, I wore Tribe shit, and it was pretty cool. It was pretty cool, and but that was the first time that you and I had met. And as the years went on,
what I remember about that, we always had problems finding you clothes because you had those gigantic legs. We always had problems.
Your regular shorts didn't fucking fit me. But it's been a long time. But we'll touch on, because so much of what we're going to talk about today is based on your story in Jiu-Jitsu. So without getting into too much detail at this point, at least, tell everybody, where you came from. You had a tremendous athletic background before Jiu-Jitsu, but just tell everybody where you're from, where you grew up, and what your relationship with sports and eventually Jiu-Jitsu became.
Okay, actually, I was kind of a Navy brat. My dad was in the Navy, so I've actually lived a lot of places. I was born in Chicago. I lived in Rhode Island. I lived in Virginia. I lived in Brooklyn, and then I wound up settling in Lodi, New Jersey. That's where I went to high school. And, I lettered in 3 sports: football, basketball, and baseball. I was best in baseball, and then I wound up actually wrestling my senior year as well. Had I known this is what I was going to do, I probably would have wrestled my whole life.
Right.
But, and then I actually got into jiu-jitsu. I was working at the New York Times with a guy in the WWF named Johnny Rods, and he used to train all the guys at Gleason's gym for the WWF, and he held like 5 or 6 black belts, and he's the one who told me about the Gracies and stuff like that. And I wound up going to a seminar that Chuck Noris put out, the Gracies in Atlantic City. That was my introduction.
That's some classic stuff right there. The Chuck Norris hosted Gracie seminar down in Atlantic City. You and I, I'm sure we have a lot of mutual friends, and I hear from so many people that I've now know in the Sayak Kali that I train, jiu-jitsu guys that I didn't know were jiu-jitsu guys that I know through Sayak that have been doing jiu-jitsu since way back then. And there's probably 2 or 3 other guys that I know that were at that seminar, in Atlantic City that the Gracies came and did, which is great. Now, let us know, what is your progression, because you own Savarese Jiu-Jitsu now and have for some time. But prior to that, you were one of the guys that was very much plugged in to a lot of the sort of jiu-jitsu community. And it was, I'm sure a lot of it had to do with your work with Tribe. I know you were helping Brian Simmons with GQ for a long while with his pro divisions and stuff. But what school did you first join, and how did your jiu-jitsu journey sort of change as far as what schools you went to and different directions you went?
Well, I trained with my first school I ever trained was David Deeve. He was actually a purple belt at the time, and he was teaching out of this guy Alex Wilkie's school down in I forgot what town it was, down southern Jersey. I used to have to travel like 15 minutes both ways, and there I met Lou Vintaloro, and me and Lewis used to train back and forth. We used to train in Lewis's basement a lot, and we used to travel up to Dave's together. So most of the time I trained with those two guys for a long time, up until the middle of my blue belt, right before my purple belt, and and that's I wound up going to Henzo Gracie, from there, and I trained there for about 7 years. And but I started getting into. I had a different mindset than a lot of other people. I was mostly about, I just wanted to learn and get as much info as I can, and stuff like that. And through like some job opportunities and stuff, and changing of the schools, I wound up going back and training with Dave again. And I got my black belt with Dave, and then Dave was after me for a long time, probably from when I was a blue belt. He was after me to open up a school, and because back then, people were opening up schools as purple belts. There was really no black belts anywhere. I
opened mine as a blue belt. I know the struggle was real.
Yeah. I mean, dude, I can tell you when I started jiu-jitsu, the only purple belts in the entire country were David Deeve, Ethan Milius out in California. And there was a guy named Dave Lentz who was down in like Red Bank, New Jersey, and the Serras, and that's it. Like for Americans, like So, but I never felt I was ready. I always wanted to just make sure I was ready. That's why I opened up my school as a brown belt, and I didn't feel I was ready before that.
Yeah, it's my path was a little different in that I started at a Helston Association, and I wanted to teach. The owner of the school, it just, we could not come to any level of agreement as to how that would progress, and I found myself out of a place to train. So I was like, you know what? And you know me long enough to know my mindset. I was like, oh yeah, nobody wants to fucking help me? Fuck all of you. I'll do it myself. And I remember when I started as a blue belt, one of the biggest things that I got was, especially the people, locally who didn't know about jiu-jitsu at that point, you're not a black belt yet? And it's like, do you realize how hard it is to get a fucking black belt? Like, that's what I was telling them back then. But the struggle was real.
There weren't any.
There weren't any.
Well, like, we had to go to Brazil. I mean, like, listen, that's how I got involved with Hoyler. I try to tell my guys, I have seminars at my school, and I'm like, and guys like, are not so quick to come. Like, man, I go to Brazil to train with this guy.
Right.
It's crazy. Like, there weren't black belts back then, and like, if you were a purple belt back then, you were like a killer.
Right. Yeah, that's right. When I first the school that I first joined, Rob Kahn used to train at, and he and I think it was Rob Gutierrez, who now owns ECU in Queens. I think they were the two purple belts at the time, and they were the two senior most guys, and they were certainly the guys that were head and shoulders above everybody in terms of ability and skill level on the mat. And what my students don't understand now, and it's like now I have multiple black belts that train here. I've been a black belt over 10 years. It's one of these things where they don't understand. Back in the day, to see a black belt was like seeing Luke Skywalker in like Return of the Jedi, like with the fucking robe. Like he was just like, they were these mythical creatures. Like if somebody was a black belt, you just like were in awe the whole time that he was in the room because they were so rare.
2 Saturdays ago, I was running my blitz class on Saturday, and we had, because I have that Jerry Rinaldi comes down and trains with my competition team too. We had 7 black belts on the mat, and I'm looking at my group, and I'm like, man, I wish I had this when I was like a blue belt and purple belt. Right. Like, it's incredible, like how far in like 15 years jiu-jitsu has come in the United States, but we just didn't have that, right. And I really believe that's why like our group is a little bit tougher than. Right. Like than a lot of the ones nowadays. We just came up with in a different time. Not right. Better or worse, just different.
Yeah. Well, I'll say better, but it's okay. So it's funny. I've always in my school and that in as we've gone through the years, I've always tried to preserve a certain element that was present back then. And way back in the day, what guys don't understand is like the guy who won the Mundial was also the guy that was the top no-gi guy, was also the guy that was fighting MMA or Vale Tudo challenge matches. Like, if you were a jiu-jitsu guy, if you represented jiu-jitsu back in the day, like, you were expected to know how to fight. You were expected to know how to deal with somebody trying to punch your fucking head off. Like, you always trained in the gi. There were just certain things that were inherent at that point in the culture of jiu-jitsu that were, I think, magical because it created a certain mindset. You had the guys like whether it was the great obviously the Gracies. If I'm thinking of like fucking Valigi Ishmael, Murilo Bustamante.
Ricardo Almeida's first fight was in Pride.
Right. Right. And that was the mindset back then. Everybody had to sort of fight. Everybody had to get to the point where, representing jiu-jitsu against other systems was like something that you prepared for in your mind. Now, it's almost ridiculous. Everybody trains jiu-jitsu,
Even back to Ricardo, the fight we were just talking about, I'm pretty sure, I could be wrong in this, my memory's a little foggy, but I think he was a replacement. I think that was like Hyen's fight, and Hyen got hurt, and then he had to go in and like take his place. But like you said, he was just representing jiu-jitsu. Like, that's what you were supposed to do. Right.
And I tell the guys the stories now, and I don't know, for you, when you opened your school, what year was it? You remember? You there? Can you hear me? Hello?
Yeah, you were freezing on me.
Oh, sorry. When you opened your school, what year was it?
1998.
When you opened your school?
No, not 1998. My school, 2006.
Right, 2006. So in 2006, we were at a certain point in the community of jiu-jitsu. Prior to that, I opened my school maybe 2002, 2003. And for me, even at that point, it was now, how do I represent jiu-jitsu against other systems was still very much a component of how I saw my mission as a school owner, jiu-jitsu school owner. And, I used to have people come in and, I want to fight the master. Like, there were the actual times where guys came in and said that. One of those fights.
I think anybody from our era who opened up a school at that time had 2 or 3 of those, matches, that they had to, defend, their honor of their school and stuff like that. Right. And getting back to what you just said, I really believe, back in our time, we were training to beat other arts and just defend ourselves on the street. And nowadays, I think a lot of schools are teaching jiu-jitsu guys to beat other jiu-jitsu guys.
Right, and I think that is exactly what it is. And the mission, the terminology I use here on the Pressure Project a lot is mission, and what it is, what's the goal of the group? Why are we all together, and what are we all trying to accomplish? So if you think of Lord of the Rings, the first one was the Fellowship of the Ring. It's like all these people came together because they had to get this ring to Mordor or whatever it was. But that's how tribes form. They come together because they want to sort of pursue a goal. And back in the day, I think is exactly what you're saying. It was to defend what we did against other people that sort of gave us this sort of paranoia in our preparation that we never wanted to let our guys down. We never wanted to let jiu-jitsu down. That was embedded in us, in those early stages.
Jiu-jitsu.
Right,
Jiu-jitsu.
exactly. I remember having matches where we were screaming that, during matches. And the whole thing is now, there isn't that sort of community of identity in jiu-jitsu whereby we see it as us versus the world. And, I would say, good or bad aside, it's really just an evolution, and we have much more of a sport-conscious community and identity now. And a lot of it has to do with, obviously, the fact that sport is so prevalent now. And it wasn't as prevalent back then, These guys
can make money with it now.
Yeah, guys can make money with it now. And, the students that we have, they have fucking tournaments available every weekend, Saturday, Sunday, different places. There was a point where I was mat side on 100% of my students' matches at tournaments. It's like this week, next month there's a GQ we're getting ready for. The month after that, there's a Naga we're getting ready for. And aside from those 2 heavy hitters, every once in a while, there'd be a smaller show. Well, now, people have professional referees. They're following, unified gi rules and, these high production level tournaments being held everywhere,
Yeah. And every weekend, like you said, I could literally be at a tournament every weekend. I had to do the same thing. I had to tell my guys, listen, I have a life, man. I can, outside of here, I can't go to tournaments every single weekend. Right. There is something every weekend now. Right. We didn't have that.
Right. I speaking about those earlier tournaments, let the listeners know, what was it like in the late 90s, or the early 2000s when I came around, which is like fucking 15 years ago. I was just talking to somebody the other day. I've had a school, this December will be 15 years. That is ridiculous to me.
Right.
And when I hear guys talk about jiu-jitsu, like, yeah, I'm a purple belt, I'm this, I'm that, it's like, that's adorable. I've been a black belt for over 10 years. Shut the fuck up. Like you see these guys now that they want to be proud of, the little tournaments they win, and it's like, shut the fuck up. We weren't even allowed to fucking train no gi when I first started. It was like frowned upon, But tell the listeners what those early tournaments were like. And all I remember is when I first started, everybody hated Henzos. Right? Henzos was like the sort of imperial presence, like they were like the state that everybody hated. I wound up having some great friends, and I still like fucking Jamal Patterson, Alan Teo. I'm still good friends with guys from that generation. But what was it like those early tournament days?
Well, man, the first ones I remember were the New York City grappling challenges. And those were crazy because they were really like the first tournaments, like in the United States on the East Coast. And we didn't know anything about like the rules or like it was just like everything was like on the fly. Right. And it was like the good matches, everybody would crowd. Like I remember there was 2 matches. There was Flavio Almeida fought Lloyd Irvin, and it was like everybody crowded the mats and like just went nuts. And then Rodrigo fought this guy Nick Sanzo, who had fought in the UFC. Mm-hmm. So it was like kind of a big deal, like, ooh, there's a UFC fighter here. And, and Rodrigo, not realizing back then that in this, Rodrigo is on a much, much higher level, and Rodrigo wound up taking him apart. And I remember a lot of people like, ooh, he just killed a guy in the UFC, but now like everything's behind fences and stuff like that. and but like back then, I mean, there were people like, if you grappled to a certain side of the mat and you were like on, say, the Henzo side, there were guys screaming at you and stuff like that. It was crazy. And there was no rules. It was almost the first UFCs. Like I remember, I still have it on VHS tape. My first, the first New York City grappling challenge, I made it to the finals, and I was beating this dude 16-0 in the final, and he tried to heel hook me because heel hooks were allowed then in white belt divisions, and I remember we went out of bounds and they restarted me in a heel hook, and I wound up losing in the final, and I was killing the guy. Right. And I remember I just see my instructor David Deeve, like from behind, you just see his head go. Like it's like one of my favorite videos, but but it was so different. It was like much more like tribal, like everybody like just crowding. It was nuts.
It was almost like small town football in like Texas.
Further, I remember one of the first tournaments in Vegas, when it was like East Coast against West Coast. I went down. There was me, Jamie Cruz, Nakapon, and crazy Todd Margolis, who I still love to this day.
Todd's out of his mind. Out of his mind.
We had Nakapon had fought Matt Hughes, and we kind of had like some words with the camps, like because Todd had said something that they took offense to, and it was just stupid. But like we almost came to blows. So then later on in the tournament, Jamie winds up fighting Matt Hughes' twin brother, and like when that happened, it was like every jiu-jitsu guy in the world came out of the stands and like surrounded that mat, surrounded the mat for that match, and it was like what you were talking about before, how like, all right, now all of a sudden Jamie's representing jiu-jitsu against like wrestling and stuff like that. Like that's how it was back then. Right. Like, and it was nuts. And I remember nobody expected Jamie to win. And when Jamie won, it was like the entire West Coast, all of a sudden, it was like East Coast, West Coast became one. And like everybody went crazy. It was just, it was different. I like that better. Like, it was better back then. It's much more professional now. Right. But I think like we grew a lot more that way than we do now with like, you were challenged more.
Right, and I think there was a because it was much more tribal back then. you had that element of connection to wanting to do your tribe proud, wanting to have everybody in your group look on you favorably as a good representative of, where you came from,
I also think that's why guys from our generation, even though a lot of us weren't from the same school, we're still very good friends. If you look at guys from what I'll call like the Grappler's Quest days, guys like me, you, and like all groups like around the country, we're all good friends, even though we were like, I don't want to say enemies on the map, but we were competing against each other.
Right.
But because I think we were all representing one art, we were representing jiu-jitsu because that's how we were taught, and most of us are Gracie trained in one way or another. That's just the way it was back then. Like, you know what I mean? So like, we competed against each other, but like when there was that time to like fight MMA against something else, like we were all behind each other.
Right, and it was certainly a testament to the way that everybody saw jiu-jitsu's role in our lives. And I will say that back then there was much more of a gratitude to jiu-jitsu in general as a sort of a component of who we were. And there was, when people spoke about the Gracies, there was an air of respect when you spoke about them. And, there were major camps in the Gracie family, obviously. There was the Humaita, excuse me one sec. Oh, sorry. The Humaita, lineage of, Horian, Hoyler, and, eventually Hoyce and whatnot. There was the, Baja line of Henzos and Carlinhos and all those people. There were the Carlson people, and there were a lot of different sort of major sort of just lines of jiu-jitsu lineage that Americans tapped into. But I think,
which is actually how the IBJJF started, because even before the IBJJF, that's how the World Championship started, because it was like everybody against Carlson's guys.
Right. And Carlson had some fucking guys, man, I tell you.
Killers. Yeah.
Talking about that era of jiu-jitsu, when you looked at the representatives of jiu-jitsu, like I remember, and I tell the story when I first started jiu-jitsu, I wanted to get back into something more competitive. I went to a judo school, and I didn't really like the judo school. I just happened to join a school that was in a little bit of a turmoil. The founder had just passed away, and I just joined like the week after that happened. And one of the guys in the school told me after training one night, and I was training there for like 2-3 weeks, hey, I'm going to check out one of those Gracie schools. Do you want to come with me tomorrow? So I was like, fuck yeah. But I remember when I was going to the Gracie school, in my mind, I was thinking I was going to be in the UFC. Like, that was what I was doing. I was going to be the guy, representing jiu-jitsu in a cage somewhere. It wasn't until much later on that, these gi tournaments came about. Like, I knew nothing about gi tournaments before I was already sold on the idea of training jiu-jitsu. But they were very much connected. And when you looked at the guys back then, especially the Carlson guys, and I had mentioned this earlier, you would see guys like Mario Sperry and Murilo Bustamante and, Valigi Ishmael, like all these guys, fought in Vale Tudo, fought in, eventually what became MMA, but they were all like gi world champion, level guys, and everybody trained with the gi.
And team was big back then. Like, in Brazil, like we were all part of a team. Like, and in Brazil, it was important for those guys to win the team championship. Like, I remember, that's why I remember Gracie Baja. That was how Holeta got started. They were looking for somebody to beat Valigi, and they brought him aboard. I think they gave him his black belt just to compete in that Worlds, if I remember correctly. And he wound up winning. That was a big deal.
Yeah, very big deal. Yeah. Got that sweep. I remember the match.
About the sweep. I actually trained with him in Brazil. One time I was in Brazil, and I remember when I got swept with that sweep. I remember thinking how cool it was. I was kicking my ass.
Right. It's like getting dunked on by Jordan or something.
Right.
But it's. I remember the first time that I went to Brazil, and I went there with Marco Perazzo. I went there with a buddy, Rob Julian, and we're there. We're training, and one of the things that we had to sort of deal with down there was nobody trained no gi. And when we trained no gi, it might have been my second trip that this happened, but whatever it was, everybody met, like a lot of different people from local schools met at one guy's school, this guy DeDeco, who now lives, I think, up in Boston. He's since come to the U.S. But everybody met at his school to train no gi because nobody trained no gi at their schools, or no one was allowed to train no gi.
Yeah.
You know, and I remember, being a guy, I wrestled before in school, and I was an experienced competitor, and I remember, and DeDeco was one of the guys that I rolled with. And he was this guy that, physically he looks like he's ready to make some fucking pizza in the, in the kitchen. Like he doesn't look anything formidable at all. And he just wiped the floor with me. And he was one of these guys that was originally tapped into the, Carlson Brazilian top team, type of generation. And it was just a different era. The understanding of the basics back then was at such a high level, and because they knew that they had to have this sort of I'll venture to say perfect approach to dealing with any comers. You didn't have to learn back in the day how to pass a De La Riva guard because number one, what the fuck is a De La Riva guard, and number two, why the fuck is somebody that knows the De La Riva guard doing it to you? You shouldn't be fighting a jiu-jitsu guy. That was the way we trained. Yeah,
it was more about self-defense back then. Getting ready for NHB, not MMA. And even now, like you look at like jiu-jitsu now is so much leg locks and stuff. Back then, nobody did leg locks. Like it was frowned upon. Used to get booed at the World Championships. I don't think leg locks really came into play until Abu Dhabi started.
Right.
And then when Abu Dhabi started, a lot of the guys, because there were other arts in there, they had to prepare for that. And if you remember, a lot of guys like started training the leg locks and training no gi for. And I really, Toiler was kind of the first guy doing the leg locks, the jiu-jitsu guys, in Abu Dhabi, and I think that's what kind of made it cool. And then I started cross-training more in wrestling, and remember guys were training with Daryl Golar, out in Brazil. He wound up becoming the wrestling coach at
Brazilian top team.
Right, Brazilian top team, and so that a lot of time, guys don't realize this stuff. Like a lot of the new guys that we lived through all of that stuff. You and I were talking. When I started jiu-jitsu, there wasn't even any schools on the East Coast. I mean, I used to have to travel almost an hour to train with David Deeb, and he was a purple belt. Like Henzos wasn't even open yet. Henzos opened in 1996. I started training in 1994. The only guys around were, from your side, like Steve Cardian had the school out in
Thornwood,
out by you. David Deeb was all the way down in like Bedminster, New Jersey. It was like almost an hour from me. Right. And there was a guy that I don't know whatever happened to him, but this guy, like I said, David Lenz, he had a school down in Red Bank, New Jersey. But that was it.
Right.
Until Henzo Gracie opened. And even then, I remember the first couple of years of Henzo Gracie, a lot of us trained at both schools because Dave was open on like say Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and Henzo's was only open a couple of days a week. So a lot of guys were training at both. They were trained with David Deeb and trained with Henzo, until Henzo's, then Henzo started fighting and he needed training partners, and, Henzo got very, very popular through the, World Combat Championship and stuff like that. And guys just want to train with him more,
Right. Well, Henzo, I've never trained with Henzo. I've met him on a couple of occasions, but the one thing about Henzo, very, very charismatic energy.
Oh, yeah.
Funny guy, and very entertaining to be around. But also, he's a guy who is from fucking Rio and is ready to fight. And,
at any time.
At any time. And like, that is the way, my mindset, that's the way we should be. Just ready if necessary, but willing to have a good time in the meantime. And you see a lot of his first generation of guys. Are guys that to this day are still, if you talk about Northeast Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, some of the most respected guys are the guys from that first generation out of Henzos. Guys, obviously Jamal comes to mind. Saw a lot of success, in MMA and in Jiu-Jitsu tournaments.
Well, if you look at his first couple of guys, like, listen, Ricardo Almeida has one of the best schools around now. Mm-hmm. He's got Frankie Edgar training out of his school now. He's got top guys in the UFC everywhere. And he's spawned he spawned a couple of other schools. A lot of the top grapplers now are still like under his flag. Matt Serra's had UFC champions and stuff like that. D'Arcy has a choke named after him.
Right.
John Danaher, like now, was St. Pierre's coach. So like you said, a lot of those guys from like his first generation of black belts, have done amazing things.
Yeah, no, and continue to this day. And I look at the tournament scene back then, and I admit there was a time that there became a time where I just stopped going to tournaments, and a lot of it, had to do with, as soon as politics started becoming like the thing, like I just didn't give a fuck. I just wanted guys to fight. At this point, I admit that I appreciate sometimes the smaller tournament where there aren't all these broader business implications, what happens that day, and guys just pay a fee, get on the mat, and just fucking go against somebody they've never seen before until that day. Or, back in the day, there were the big super fight divisions and stuff, and you had a lot to do with that at Grappler's Quest. What was that experience like, because it was always, you go to a tournament and you would have these regular divisions, and then they'd always, like, I guess the business model back then was you would market a pro division that people would be able to watch in addition, to participating in the tournament itself. What was that like, and how'd that come about?
It was crazy, bro, to be honest with you. It was, there was so much politics involved in that crap, too. I kind of got involved because Brian was too nice a guy. And, and there was, like, some guys, like, starting to take advantage of him. And he knew I had a good reputation, like, with everybody, and that I wouldn't be pushed around. So, like, he asked me to come on board. And but, there was still always guys, like, trying to, like, work their way, like, trying to maneuver around the pro divisions. Right. The way the pro divisions worked is we got sponsors, like Tribe Fight, where, remember, Storm back in the day, and what was the other guy? Sprawl. Remember Sprawl?
Yeah, Sprawl was big.
Yeah, we would put up, like, a couple of $1,000s, and, and the guys would, we'd get the best grapplers around to fight. And, we did our best seeding them. We made mistakes along the way. Like, there were some guys that were much better than we thought they were, that were seated way too low, and over the years. But I thought we did a really good job. And like, over the years, we had some amazing tournaments. Don't forget, we've had, Zanji fought, Dean Lister fought, Ricardo Almeida fought, like, and back then, some of these guys were going to Abu Dhabi. Like, I still say that the Ricardo Almeida Jacare fight was the best grappling match I've ever seen. Remember that 6 overtime match?
Yeah.
But back then, it was tough. Guys were constantly backing out, and like, and you know me, like, you backed out of me once, you came back to me, you won the next time, hey, bro, go fuck yourself. You're not coming in. It was just, but we put, and I had enough respect for, like, guys from my team, and, like, guys from a lot of the other teams in the heads out, like Rob would send me him, you fought in them. Like, a lot of the guys, and I had enough respect for everybody that I would never screw any of the guys that were, and that's why we got to grow that for a while. And, I'm to be honest with you, I'm really, really proud of what we've done.
Right.
What we did back then, and Brian Simmons, if you do see this, I'm still waiting to get in your Hall of Fame, by the way. But,
throw that out there.
Throwing that out there, But no, I'm really proud of, the matches that we put on back then, and I really think we had a major part in the growth of jiu-jitsu in the country, and like the tournament scene and stuff like that. And we, and we spawned like a lot of good stuff. And it wasn't just us. Like, remember, our late friend Joe Prioli was putting on good stuff back then too. He was one of the first guys putting on, like, you fought in a couple of them, putting on super fight divisions. In fact, wasn't like your kind of like coming out party was in Joe's tournament, right? The one I think you wound up fighting Kenny.
I wound up losing to Kenny Florian in the semifinals. And that was the tournament where Eddie Rowland, who I'm buddies with now, but back in the day, we were all trying to kill each other. I remember Marco Perazzo was helping design the tournament, and I don't think I've ever told this story on the podcast too. I think it's a pretty cool one. That he needed somebody for an 8th slot in this pro tournament, and Rob Kahn, who his jiu-jitsu is ridiculous, but he never was really a avid competitor. I was the opposite. I was a competitor before I knew jiu-jitsu, so I was just looking for shit to compete in. And he was telling Peraza, "Listen, I got this guy Justin. He's really fucking good. He'll fit the thing." So Peraza was like, "All right, we'll fit him in." And for this 8th slot, they needed somebody to fill this 8th slot in this tournament. Now, this tournament had Todd Margolis,
Lehman.
Mark Lehman, Kenny Florian, obviously, Stephen Hague. I forget who else was there, but there was a Brian Simmons, who I didn't know at the time, didn't know me. Well, I don't want to throw him under the bus too bad. He came with Eddie Rowland and wanted Eddie Rowland to get into the 8th spot. Obviously, Eddie Rowland being somebody who competed in Grappler's Quest a lot and was, I think, a friend of Brian's at the time.
Yeah, they were close. Yeah,
they were good friends, and he was trying to get him in. Understandable. But Peraza had said, "Well, listen, I already told this guy Justin Garcia that he could have the spot," and Brian Simmons was like, "Well, who's this guy?" Like, Eddie Rowland had won a couple of tournaments at that point. He was very well-respected competitor, established already. And Peraza, and him and Joe Prioli, with Prioli's, backing, the two of them were like, "Well, you know what? We'll have the two of them have a match for that 8th spot." Right?
Right.
And obviously, I didn't have a problem with Eddie Rowland, but that was the time where everybody was like, "Who the fuck is this guy?" Because I beat Eddie, I beat Stephen Hague, and I lost in the last 30 seconds to Kenny Florian. That fuck, I'm gonna get you back eventually.
You came out in that HCK gear, the Tyson. You look like King Kong. I mean, you were.
I was a fucking tank, and I was ready to rock, and but it was the time where Peraza and I became good friends. Eventually, I went to Brazil with him. Maybe 6 months later, so it was the time where I think Rob Kahn, took me and sort of introduced me to all his jiu-jitsu friends, and I met everybody there. It was the first time I ever met Brian Simmons, the first time I ever really hung out with Peraza, and I got to meet Joe Prioli, and I remember this great time, this funny point at that tournament. Mark Lehman comes over to me, and he goes, and I'm wearing my Valley Tudos, looking like I'm ready to run through a brick wall, and he's like, "Yeah, you should start squatting." And he turned away and just walked away. I'm like, "Who the fuck is that guy?" And I'm ready to I don't know who Mark Lehman is at the time. I'm like, "Fuck this guy." And Khan is laughing. So I'm like, "All right, well maybe this guy's a friend or something." But it was just an incredible experience. Competing back in those days.
You know what I remember about that tournament too?
Mm-hmm.
That was back in the days when Margolis used to come out singing.
Oh, he used to sing out of his fucking mind.
He was fucking shot.
Competing
but that match,
he
came out and sang "Let's Get It On."
Yeah.
Okay, and Lehman was pacing back and forth like he couldn't wait. He wanted to kill Todd. Todd was just nuts. he was so funny, bro.
Oh, fucking hilarious. Absolutely hilarious.
But I remember Joe Prioli's tournaments. The first one he had, I remember he decided last minute to just put together like a 16-man. Somebody must have gave him some money. I remember he put it up $1,000, and he asked me to fight in it. And that was actually when I had that bad knee injury. That's when I tore my knee. But I remember the match that I tore my knee. There was a kid named Danny Lima who was fighting in Shuto. He was a little guy, but he used to go in every tournament and fly and arm lock everybody. But I remember telling D'Arcy, I go, "Listen, this guy might beat me, but he ain't fucking flying arm locking me." And we went outside, and I remember it was in the hallway of a high school gym, and D'Arcy was doing flying arm locks on each one of my arms. We were practicing before matches. It fucking wasn't happening to me. I was not losing in 10 seconds. It just wasn't.
I remember that guy, Daniel Lima. Yeah. He was pretty solid. So,
but that tournament, I still break Kurt Pellegrino's balls to this day because he came out of one side and I would have came out of the other side. I was beating that kid Dan Lima 9-0 when I tore my knee.
Right.
And so Kurt wound up winning the tournament. He won $1,000. To this day, I tell him he owes me $500. Still never paid.
Yeah. Shout out to Kurt Pellegrino down at Pellegrino MMA. Where's he located in Jersey?
He's in Belmar.
Belmar.
He's for for the party kids familiar with the Belmore scene, he's right across the street from Paul's Tavern.
Right. So, Kurt's a good dude. Another guy out of his fucking mind. I love him.
Yeah.
But now moving, back to the, your journey through jiu-jitsu. You're one of these guys that has had a somewhat unique, maybe a little bit more common today, but certainly unique back in the day, where you were a student of jiu-jitsu, you did business in jiu-jitsu, and then you opened a school eventually. A lot of people, they do the school first, and then they find some business, venture to pursue. What was opening a school like in jiu-jitsu at that point? Because when did you start? 97?
2006 I opened up my school.
Well, now I'm asking the opposite question. When did you start jiu-jitsu?
Yeah, I started jiu-jitsu in 1994.
Oh, 94. Okay, so
yeah.
A student in 94, eventually now you open a school in 2006. What was the change like? And I was there, with you at that point, and we had done business, together concerning your school eventually. But as the experience, to you, having gone through all of that, at that point you're 12 years in, you finally opened a school. What was different about the school that maybe you didn't anticipate, or that you were pleasantly surprised to see?
Oh, I mean, first of all, I opened up my school. I had no fucking idea what I was doing. I opened up my school like I was opening a hot dog stand. I thought like, oh, I was a good jiu-jitsu competitor. People are gonna flock to me, and it just didn't happen that way. Like, it took a long time. I think of some of the stuff I did. I actually had a drum set in my office of where I used to sign people up back in the day. I did so many things wrong, but it was like I said. Like you were talking about before, we touched on it before, back then people opened schools as like blue belts, purple belts, brown belts. I opened mine as a brown belt. And, and if you look, a lot of I think the best schools, most successful schools now were guys who came up in that era, because like you said, we came up, we understand like everything. Like even now, I know all the gun defense of jiu-jitsu. I know all the knife defense of jiu-jitsu. I don't think a lot of guys now know any of that stuff.
I had to know it to get my black belt. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So like and depending on what side you came from, like you just didn't have to know that stuff. And again, there's guys now that are getting black belts, because they know how to grip sleeves and shit. Like it just, it doesn't really, if like you're going to be a school owner, you need to know all of that stuff. And right now, people, you got to realize. 85 to 90% of your students are not going to be those guys. Like, and quite frankly, those guys are the biggest pains in the ass anyway. Right. But it's everyday people coming in, like looking to you, like to solve a problem in their life. They need to know how to defend themselves. They need confidence. They need, I remember one time you actually had a commercial that said, hey, some people just have no friends. But like, and I think the guys who came up in our era, like, we were looking to solve those problems for people, and still are. Whereas I think a lot of guys now, they open up schools because they're looking to have a competition team, right. And that shit don't work.
Right. It's a rude awakening for a lot of people, understanding that just like when you're fighting, there is a certain universal truth in what works and what doesn't work, and you have to respect that, or you will volunteer to be a victim. In that arena. Same thing with opening up a school. Just because you know how to fight doesn't mean that, the identity of being a productive, successful school owner has anything to do with your ability to fuck somebody up in a fight,
Right.
And it was something that I had to learn. I know you had to learn. But it's also a testament to, I would say, guys like you and what I had gone through, that when we approach it respecting the spirit of a thing, we open ourselves to what it takes to get the job done. We're results-oriented people, and it's definitely something that I think more and more people are starting to realize today, where, it's possible to run a successful school, but if you are not respecting good business, good jiu-jitsu, good martial arts.
And you can't do it alone. Like, you need to learn, Like, listen, I'm the first one to say it. If it wasn't for you, my school wouldn't be where it is now. Like, everybody needs somebody that's either been there before to help them, or, you learn a lot. And you got to, just like what jiu-jitsu taught us. You got to stay open-minded. Like, you know, for these guys that are closed book and think they know everything, like, you know, you're going to level off at a certain point, just like you would in jiu-jitsu.
Right.
Like, you know, like, you got to stay open-minded to new things and, like, new ideas and, like, you know, and understand that there are people out there that know more about this shit than you do.
Right.
You know.
I remember being in your school a few years ago, and this is when you were upstairs, I think it was. And and I remember, and for some reason I remember like listening, there was this podcast or this audiobook I was listening to, and I hit traffic coming back from your school, and I finished the audiobook. And I remember this one visit to your school as being the time I listened to this one particular book. It was a Christopher Hitchens book at the time. But anyway, I remember everything about visiting your school because of that. And I remember there was the area where you signed people up. You had a bunch of things. I don't think it was a drum set, but because that was in the smaller school, I think it was.
Yeah, that was in the first school. Yeah.
Right. But I remember there was something where I told you like, yeah, Sav, you probably shouldn't have this here. And you were like, why not? And I remember explaining something to you at some point. You were like, well, fuck them. If they don't want it, I'm like, no, it's not fuck them. You know, it's like, fuck them if you don't like the pepperoni on the pizza. Like, some people don't like pepperoni. You know, like, you got to sell a slice without pepperoni on it. You know, like, it's, you know, like, listen, if it's fuck them, I'm all about fuck them. You know, I'm with you on that, but this particular instance, we can't say fuck. And I remember explaining it. And I remember you going, all right, that makes sense. And then, you know, you made the change. But it was a different skill set. You know, it was definitely a different skill set. Let me get into these questions now. There's 3 questions I like to ask, you know, guests of the podcast. And you alluded to it, you know, just now with talking about, you know, doing things alone. But a little bit more formally, you know, to ask, you know, what has Tribe meant to you during your success? And I don't mean the brand that you started Tribe, but what is the difference between having a group around you that shares, you know, your mission, as opposed to maybe doing things, you know, on your own without that support?
I believe it's vital. It's vital to success. I mean, you cannot succeed if you don't have a good, solid group around you and people like, you know, people that are loyal, people that, you know, that have the same vision as you, the same goals as you. Like, you want to surround yourself with good, positive people, you know, that share the same, like, commonalities as you, you know, so you could get to the same place and reach the same goals. Like, you know, the people who, you know, those Ronin type guys, you know, you just can't do it alone. Like, you know, doesn't work. Right. You know, I'm all about, like, you know, the whole tribe mentality and, like, you know, the team mentality. You know, it's, you know, you want to be successful, you got to have people around you, you know, to help. Nobody does it alone.
No, right on. And it's something that, you know, the listeners of the Pressure Project, I'm always trying to drive home, and the fact that I have such a sort of eclectic group of guests saying the same thing is really, you know, by design, to illustrate to these guys that it doesn't matter. Your story isn't any different. Your struggle, your journey, your goals, it isn't any different. These are universal laws. There is a synergy that a tribe provides you that just cannot be reached alone. And it's really not a testament or a commentary on what the individual's potential is. Like, you could be a 100%. Tremendously, just capable, talented individual. It doesn't matter. With a tribe, you're going to be able to do more, hands
Absolutely.
down, Now, another question I like to ask, and this is a question that I ask in lieu of asking the very, common, what would you do differently, and what regrets do you have over the years, which I don't think is a productive way to look at one's journey. But what I like to ask instead of that is, if you could have access to Chris Savarese at 20 years old, right, and you could have, a 20-minute conversation with him, what would you tell him to sort of maybe streamline what experiences you eventually learned, some lessons you learned later on, sort of giving him a shortcut rather than, having taken the long way, as all of us have? What would you tell 20-year-old Sav?
man. First of all, I tell him to save his money. You and I have talked privately. We're, like you said at the beginning, we're very good friends. We were completely different people. We were 20 years old. I wish I had listened to people that were trying to help me more. Back then, like people that were actually giving me good advice, like my grandfather and my dad and stuff like that. But I would tell 20-year-old Sav to find a mentor and listen to him. To try to help them through, like you said, to kind of cut that road, make it a lot shorter. Because I definitely took the long route and the wrong route, and I don't regret anything I did. Not one single thing. I mean, I kind of do, but I really do believe that everything that happens to us in our life and all the mistakes we make lead us to who we are. So in that sense, I don't fucking regret anything. But I definitely could have did things differently, and I wish I listened to like some smarter people back then. I wish I had the money I had when I was 20 years old. But that would probably be the best piece of advice that I could give to somebody. And kind of even getting back to what we just, your last question, like, listen, surround yourself with the right people and, get a good solid, like, tribe or foundation or team, around you and stuff like that. That'd probably be the best advice I give to somebody.
Yeah, that's solid, man.
20-year-old moron of a self.
That's solid. Solid answer. So, final question before we wrap it up. You are a Jiu-Jitsu school owner. You've been practicing Jiu-Jitsu, over 20 years now at this point. Somebody is coming to you and they want 3 pieces of advice to become a proficient, eventually master in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. What are the 3 things you tell them? Now, they're not training with you. They're going to train at a school on the other side of the world. But they're asking you for your sage advice as a master of this jiu-jitsu journey, having been in it over 20 years. What are the 3 things you tell them? Okay, 3 things. Number 1, okay, you got to find the right instructor in the right school. Okay, that's number 1. Like, again, people like us who've been around for 20 years understand that what we're taught in jiu-jitsu translates to life. So you can take a lot of these answers and translate them over to life. 1, you got to find the right instructor in the right school, okay? Same as finding a mentor in life, okay? You got to train the fucking gi. Got to train the gi.
Nowadays people want to skip that part, but listen, in the beginning, I don't let any of my new students not train the gi for a year, okay? The gi is a cheat, and it creates good habits, okay? Somebody grabs your collar, you get posture, okay? Somebody grabs your sleeve, you pull your arms back. The gi creates good habits, okay? And it actually helps you in submissions. If you start training without a gi, other than a guillotine, you're not going to fucking submit anybody for a long time. There's a lot more submissions involved. You'll learn a lot more training in the gi, at least for the first couple of years. We were joking around before about how, like, listen, we were purple belts and it was forbidden to train the gi, but you know what? I really think that's who we are. That's why we are. Right. I'm a big believer in training in the gi, especially in the beginning. And the last is, this is all stuff we touched on. Surround yourself with positive people. Don't listen to any of these negative people. Haters are going to hate. That's what they fucking do. That's why they call them haters. Yeah, exactly. Like, that's what they do. Like, people who like to eat. Right. People like to hate. That's what they do. Eliminate those people in your life. I did that about 15 years ago. I took a good solid look at myself, and all the people in my life who were negative and that were bringing me down, I got rid of all of them. And my life got so much better. Right. My life got so much better. So eliminate the negativity in your life. Try to surround yourself with positive people, positive team. Find the right instructor, mentor in school. Train the gi, and stay positive. And understand. If I could get into like a 3A, the first year of jiu-jitsu sucks. Okay, you got to understand it's hard. Keep showing up. I actually just wrote a blog about this. Yep. You're right. Keep showing up. You got to keep showing up. It will get better. The piece of advice I could give to anybody that's even listening now, not the new student like in the form of question that you asked, but a guy who's a white belt out there, understand, look around the room, and all those upper belts that you think are so good and so amazing, and even your professor, every single fucking person in that room has been exactly where you are right now.
That's right.
Every single one of them. And if they could do it, you could do it too. Do not quit. Just keep showing up.
That's solid, man. Great answer. All right, man, we're going to wrap it down. This has been everything that I thought it would be and more. So every time you and I get together, we always have great conversations. I knew it wouldn't be hard to sort of bring a lot of that to the podcast, and I appreciate that. Where can people find out about your school in New Jersey?
You can check me out on it's either chrissavarese.com or njbjj.com. You can find out all about my school there. You can call 201-933-5134. I also wanted to shout out, I have 3 fighters fighting in the Fight to Win show on April 8th in Bayville, New Jersey. Main event, a couple of UFC guys, Tom DeBlas, Kurt Pellegrino fighting on the card. Okay, check that out too. Yeah, everybody's welcome to my school anytime. Thanks for the shout out there, buddy.
No problem. All right, Sav, I'm going to let you go. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. I've known you a long time, and you're one of the people in the jiu-jitsu community I've always respected a tremendous amount. And I want to grow that list of people that I respect, and I look to make new connections. But you're somebody I've known 15 years and has always, maintained that relationship of respect with me, and I appreciate you for that.
Thank you, Chim. Feelings mutual, bro. You know that.
So I'm going to let you go now, but we'll talk soon, man. Thanks again.
Sure. I got to come see you.
All right.